Have you ever wondered whether God actually notices the little things that you do? Not the extraordinary moments, not the big achievements, but I mean the things nobody else sees. The prayer you whisper before going to work, or visiting your elderly parents, cleaning the church after everyone has gone home, or staying faithful in your marriage when nobody applauds you. Sometimes we ask ourselves a very honest question: does any of this really matter? A few years ago, I have visited an elderly priest who had spent almost 50 years in one parish. His health no longer allowed him to celebrate Mass publicly, and looking around his room, I expected to find awards, photographs, certificates, something that would remind of everything he had done. And there was nothing. Only a crucifix, a worn breviary, and few old photographs. And I asked him whether he was ever disappointed that so much of his ministry had gone almost unnoticed. And he smiled and replied, "If God remembers, it doesn't matter who forgets." I have never forgotten these words because they capture perfectly well the Gospel's message today. But first, the first reading, which tells us about the woman from Shunem. She notices the prophet Elisha traveling through her town and quietly prepares a small room for him. Nothing spectacular, just a bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp. And she isn't trying to press anyone with this. She isn't bargaining with God. She simply recognizes God's servant and offers him hospitality. But God notices. He gives her something she had long stopped hoping for: a son. Later, when that child dies unexpectedly, God restores his life also through prophet Elisha. And the lesson couldn't be clearer. God never forgets even the hidden acts of love done for him. And then St. Paul takes us even deeper. He reminds us that through baptism something extraordinary happened. We died. And that sounds dramatic, but St. Paul means it quite literally. The old self died, and a new person is born. Because most of us were baptized as babies. We rarely think about it, but in the early church, becoming a Christian often meant losing your family, your job, your reputation. Even some Jewish families in the ancient world held funeral prayers for relatives who became Christians. Why? Because baptism changes everything. You truly no longer belong first to yourself, but you belong to Christ. And that's exactly why Jesus says something really shocking. He says, "Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me." He isn't telling us to love our families any less. He's telling us to love him first. Because only when Christ is first can everything else find its proper place. And then comes another sentence from the Lord: "Take up your cross." Most people immediately think of illness or suffering, and sometimes it's true. But the cross is much bigger than that. The cross means remaining faithful when faithfulness costs us something, telling the truth when lying would be easier, forgiving when revenge feels justified, choosing honesty when dishonesty seems more profitable, loving someone who cannot repay you. That's also the cross. And finally, Jesus says something almost too beautiful to notice. Even a cup of cold water given in his name will not lose its reward. Think about it. Not a miracle, not building a cathedral, not changing the whole world, just a cup of water. That's how God measures greatness. Maybe the greatest saints are people whose names we will never know. The mother who quietly taught her children how to pray, or the grandfather who never missed Sunday Mass, or a volunteer who cleaned the church every week, or a nurse who treated every patient with dignity. The teenager, perhaps, who chose honesty over popularity. Small acts, invisible ones, but none of them are invisible to God. And perhaps that's the greatest temptation today, that we believe that goodness changes nothing, that kindness goes unnoticed, that faithfulness to God is wasted. And this Sunday's Gospel says exactly the opposite. Nothing given to Christ is ever lost. No prayer, no sacrifice, nor hidden acts of charity, no cross carried with love is gone. So perhaps today we should ask ourselves a very simple question. Who am I trying to impress? People or God? Because if God remembers, it really doesn't matter who forgets. Have a blessed Sunday.